start now.
Okay, we're not going to call the meeting to order, but we're going to start.
Yes, okay. We're going to start. Welcome to Washington Street Church, formerly Washington Street United Methodist Church, formerly Washington Street Protestant Methodist Church. We've had a lot of names in the last hundreds of years, since 1829. However, one important thing is I want to tell you how to get to the restrooms before I get started. You go back the hall, you make a right, you make a right, you make a left. In fact, you're trying to get behind the organ, but you got to go around like a donut to get there. And you're welcome to ignore me and go do that if you need to. So my name's Joyce Conklin, and I know some of you from the Historical Society because I did this very program, I think in 2015, for the Rogersville Church. That was my first book that I did about windows and stained glass windows. I'm always just intrigued with names of people that no one knows who they are. Who is that? We don't know who she is. And who's that? We don't know anything about him. So when Doug and I became members here, we sit about where Zach is sitting. And I kept looking at Eliza Hook. And I just kept thinking, who is she? What does she do? Does she have any children or grandchildren or great-great-great-grandchildren? So she was the first person, she was my inspiration for this whole thing. And I know you're genealogists, and I know you want to know about people, but I like architecture too. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the architecture and make you wait on the people information, okay? So this church building was built in 1893. This was the back wall at one time. So basically, this is original. This part of the church is original, basically. That was the back wall. In 1916, the addition was built. What happened when the addition was built? 3 big windows were lost. So on a good day, you can see shadows of where some of the windows are. It's not really good tonight, but some days you can see shadows of where probably a set of windows like the ones in the back were. We don't know what happened to them. They're gone. Okay, so we've got 3 windows and people whose names were on there that are lost. So that's kind of sad to me. The organ is original. It does not play like the original because it has a newer insert. That organ was donated in part by Andrew Carnegie, and A.B. Miller from Waynesburg College helped in the fundraising of that. And then I found out about Andrew Carnegie. I didn't believe that. So I looked it up. Andrew Carnegie gave money to 7,500 churches for organs. So that was part of his philanthropy. So even though it doesn't work, it's still beautiful. I found out the church was built in 1893. I found an 1893 dedication newspaper article from the Waynesburg Republican. And it told who the stonemaker was, who the brick mason was, and the carpenter. And they're people from right here in Waynesburg. And it was, stonemason was Joseph Yoders, the bricklayer was William Johnson, and the carpenter was Stephen Acklin. And when I looked them up in our Ancestry.com account, they were from around this area. So that all made sense. I found a catalog from 1893, and these pews came from the Globe Furniture Company. So I found a catalog, found the company where they came from. I found the style inside the catalog. So these are original pews. I'm at a loss. I've never found out who the original glassmaker was. I didn't find it. And when you look at them, they are a different style than most anywhere. You know, there are no scenes of Jesus and lambs and crosses, mostly geometric. So you'll see that some of the paint in the names is flaking off because it's 130 years old. Kevin Morris, who is from here in Waynesburg, he's a sign painter. I don't know if you know him or not. He has repainted 2 of the windows for us. So you'll see which 2 those are as we go around. So, anything else that I forgot? Okay. Anyway, we'll just pay a little homage to the ones we've lost. And there's 2 empty windows over here. I don't know if the paint has flaked off or if they were just never painted on. So anyway, would it be okay if we kind of did a walking tour, or would you rather me just talk to you about each window? I didn't want to do a PowerPoint and read you. Are you comfortable where you are? Okay, that's good. Oh, and by the way, this type of church plan is called the Akron plan, A-C-R-O-N. When you have a main church room for worship and a little room off to the side, it's called the Akron plan. So some churches have all the way around. They'll have a Sunday school room so they can come back to worship. But over here in the Akron, in the Sunday school room, we have the middle window, which is very large, called the Pipes window. Now, the Pipes family was here in the 1800s, early 1900s. As far as I know, there are no Pipes families around here anymore. No one with that name. However, there are Pipes in the United States. So our Pipes was John R. Pipes. He was born in Morrisville. And if you young guys don't know where Morrisville is, that's where Sheets is now, okay? And there was a Morrisville Methodist church over there. We were actually in a charge with Morrisville, and I'll tell you a little more about that. But Mr. Pipes had daughters, Mary, Emma, and Daisy, and his wife, Lenny, and they were members of our church. He was just someone in the church who did a lot of things. He was actually clerk of courts in 1884 and reelected in 1887. So that's John Pipes. There's more information on the paper by the windows, okay? I'm not going to read it all to you. There is a window with some initials on it, YPSCE, Morrisville. So we were in that Morrisville charge. So that's the Young People's Society of Christian Endeavor. So that was the youth group. Youth group made enough money to have their own window. So I think that's pretty cool. So there's that. I'll come over here to my Eliza. She's my inspiration. One thing about you genealogists, you like to know about ancestors, and they're a little easier to find than descendants. My goal was to find descendants so they could come and pay honor to these people in their windows, okay? It's harder to find descendants than it is ancestors because you have so many different branches. But Eliza Hook is a famous name here in Greene County. Jack Hook, who was an attorney in New York City, he came to visit us one day, and he's not a descendant of Eliza, but he's a descendant of Eliza's father-in-law. So you have to go back one generation to get all these Hooks who are attorneys here in Greene County. But Eliza Hook had 10 children. One of them was an attorney. He had no children. He has no descendants. But Eliza Hook, I did find some of her descendants, and one of her daughters married a Blair, who had a daughter who married a Bailey, E-Y, because you know Greene County has Y and EY Baileys. And I just kind of followed through with that, and I found some descendants living in Titusville, Pennsylvania, that are Baileys, descended from the Bailey and Carmichael's Eli Bailey. Now, once I found about Eli Bailey, there were 3 Eli Baileys from from Carmichael's. So you have to find the right Eli Bailey and follow that line. It was very complicated. So anyway, I did find descendants that are still have the Bailey name, living in Titusville, Pennsylvania. So, and I only got his information because my daughter-in-law is from Titusville. I called her mother. Her mother said, yeah, my friend Jerry, he golfs with Rick Bailey. Yeah, we know them. So, and then he said, how did you find me? And I said, I found your dad's obituary. So you guys know all about obituaries because you get all your good information from an obituary. So that's Eliza. Oh, her husband was a harness maker. And you know the building that Mary Beth Pastorius fixed up? It's got, she calls it the Morgan Hook Building now, but it was the Hook Building. That family lived there. They had their harness shop on the main street. So that's Eliza. She's my inspiration. Harriet Crane Ingram. By the way, her paper fell. Harriet Ingram has this little window. I did not find any descendants in this family. She had several children, but one of the descendant names is Wood, which Becky's familiar with, Reinhardt, and they lived out in the Jefferson area. So I think that's right. Yeah. So anyway, Harriet Crane, you recognize the last name Crane, and Ingram. So I didn't find any ancestors there. Maybe you might know of some. So that's Harriet. The Jim Hughes family from Amity. So you wonder why somebody from Amity would have a window here? Well, at one time this church was in a charge. That means they shared preachers and services. They were in a charge with the church in Amity. So the Jim Hughes family, he had 2 sons, Blanchard and Haldane Hughes. So, you know, you can't mix up those names when you're looking up ancestry information. Both boys went to Yale Law School, came back to Washington County, and practiced law as Hughes and Hughes. However, neither of them had any children. So there are no descendants to find over here with this window. No direct descendants, anyway. Their father, Jim Hughes, was in the 140th Pennsylvania Cavalry in the American Civil War, which is from Greene County, Washington. And our preacher, Bill Parker, is a reenactor for the 140th. So that was kind of a nice find about that. In the back, we have a Reverend Jordan. His name is Christian P. Jordan. And he was a preacher here, and I have no descendants to found his. You can read a little bit about him back there. One of the windows that got repainted was Gideon J. John. So when I found out about him, he died very young, like at the age of 35. And a couple years later, his wife remarried Reverend Jordan's nephew. So the widow's name is Mariah Jordan, is whose name is on the bottom of the window. She dedicated that window for her husband, and he had been gone for 20 years by the time, you know, the window was made. I did find some Gideon J. John But anyway, she's from Florida, and she told me that the last remaining John, John, as the last name, is her nephew. He's in his 40s, never married, never had any children, so she said he's the last of the Johns. But I found another family over in Westmoreland County on a different line, and they actually came to our All Saints Day presentation when I did this before. So I did have some descendants here. So I thought that was pretty cool. The big window in the back, and you can read about Martha Ray Sutton. She and her husband were born in England. They immigrated here. He immigrated first and went back a year later to bring her over and maybe one of the older daughters. But he was a preacher, and he preached for many, many years in different places. But here in Waynesburg, he preached. And they did have a daughter that married a Walter Scott, who was a professor at Waynesburg College. And their house is the neat house on the other side of Washington Street. I don't know, maybe a block or so down past the hair salon. And I remember years and years ago, Doug, you'll remember, Danny Litwinovich lived in that house. So I call that the Litwinovich house. It's got the neat roof to it, but that's the Scott house. So Scott is one of the descendant names we could look for. Reverend Samuel Young is next to Martha Sutton. He was also in the American Civil War, but he was in a different infantry, a different unit. He actually, after the Civil War, when he was preaching, he went to Kansas and founded a town called Radical City, Kansas. He set up churches there. He set up many, many churches all over. He was also involved in the Monongahela Academy, which part of that turned into West Virginia University. So he's kind of famous. He has no descendants, though. So he and his wife died with no children. Back in the corner, the last window, their last name is Reagan, R-A-G-A-N. And there are two Reagans mentioned in that window, and Zechariah and Joab. They were both, it says they were pioneers in the Methodist Protestant church, and their story's pretty unique. Their mother took them to a camp meeting when they were young boys, and they were converted, and they became preachers. And Zechariah Reagan Jr., their father was Zechariah. There's three Zechariah Reagans I want to tell you about. The father was Zechariah Reagan Sr., Zechariah Reagan Jr. His descendants moved to Ohio. So I couldn't find any of his descendants around here. Joab Reagan had one son. His name was Zechariah Connell Reagan. And his father died young. He was sent here to be raised in Waynesburg. And he had two daughters. One daughter was Emma Reagan, who married a Pipes, but not that Pipes family. So we actually had two Emma Pipes I was looking for, okay? This Emma Pipes Reagan, or Reagan Pipes, had one son. So her father was an only child. She had an only child son. He died of influenza in 1919 over in France somewhere. I have his picture back. There aren't any descendants there. So where we have lots of possible descendants in some of these, some of them I'm sure we don't have any. So we have their names, and we have you know, their information to remember them by. So that's why I wanted to do this. And I need to give one more shout out to somebody. Back in 1993, I'm coming back up here. This church had its 150th anniversary. Let's see if I'm counting that right. 100th anniversary of this building. And a former member, Malvine Zollers, wrote a book. Do you guys know Malvine? Yes. She wrote this book before Ancestry.com, before the internet. She did it the old-fashioned way. She went and looked at newspaper articles. She went and looked at microfilm and all that stuff. She went to libraries. She found pictures, those pictures over there of all those past pastors of this church. Not all of them, but she has information on all the pastors. She wrote a book called A Tribute to the Ministers of Washington Street United Methodist Church, Biographical Sketches. She wrote that. I just can't believe she did it before internet. Like, she did it the old-fashioned way. I was doing all this research, starting with Eliza, and I looked in the back of the book, and she had already done it. She had done all this information that I was looking for. It's in the back of this book on all the people in the windows. So I have to give a shout out to Malvine. She's no longer with us, and I never met her, but I'm sure some of you.
We did. We've got the book.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
extra copies of it.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a few extra copies. So Malvine did the original work. If I added to it, I found some, you know, military records and different things. But I'm giving all, you know, all this was done by Malvine. I just brought it back up again. So I'm just going to invite you to walk around and read a little bit more about everybody, because some of these people are just fascinating, what they did and how many children they had, how many children they lost, where they came from, where they went, everything. So I'll be here. Thank you. And walk around, please, and enjoy the windows. Oh, Genealogical Society. My husband Doug is here. He was with Cypress Amex, or who helped with the restoration of the building? I have your picture in a news.
You and I are in a picture and tape together.
Oh, okay. I have that at home somewhere. But anyway, that's my husband Doug. So thanks for coming, Doug. We've been babysitting for 2 days, so this is our night out. So stand up, walk around, have a cookie. I told everybody I made them for you at Sam's. Have a water. Yeah, I made those for you at Sam's. Have a water. Please enjoy. Please read about these people. They're fascinating. So, okay, I'm going to let you get out of here.
1929. His name is George Brown.
What's that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
We had our SAR
We had ours today.
today. Gosh,
Not camp. Look at all these names.